How can the Miami Dolphins keep their offense in between the lines with Skylar Thompson at the helm? We're exploring that here today on this episode of Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft Lead for the 33rd team. You can find all of our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Dolphins facing the outlook and the prospect of not having their starting quarterback for an indefinite amount of time, and that means Skylar Thompson is projected to be the team's starting quarterback against Seattle. The team did add a quarterback, Tyler Snoop Huntley, to the roster off of the Baltimore Ravens practice squad yesterday. I think that is a fascinating move for what it could bring for new dynamics to the quarterback room. But very difficult to imagine that he is going to start on such short notice coming into a new scheme that is finely tuned in the way in which the Dolphins offense is to a timing-oriented passing attack with a lot of route stems and adjustments based on defensive leverage. So I think that's the first thing. This offense, it's like an exotic car, right? And if you're not a car person, the exotics, the $1 million plus vehicles that go to all the tracks and have the computers plugged in and it runs the diagnostics on every setting of the car to go out and run as a supercar, as highly engineered of a time as you possibly can. It's what this passing attack has been engineered to be. The problem is not all of the cogs within the offensive wheel right now are firing on particularly close to all cylinders. The Dolphins, and I'm looking at my season grades to date for the Dolphins and their offense. 3 of the bottom 5 per snap above or below expectation performers are wide receivers: Robbie Chosen, Braxton Berrios, and Grant Dubose. And that's on 61, 30, or 38, and 29 respective snaps through 2 games. So you have these 2 deluxe wide receivers in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and yet the other ancillary components of the offense are not firing particularly well. But here's where things get interesting. Top performers for the season in this skill group, or amongst all players, it's running back Devon Achane, wide receiver Jalen Waddle, running back Jeff Wilson, tight end Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill, Julian Hill. Those are 5 of 6 of the top 7 offensive performers on the entire offensive side of the ball are running backs and tight ends and wide receivers. The Dolphins and their success at times offensively this year have come in some different ways than what we're used to in the Mike McDaniel era. But I think the first acknowledgement that you have to make is Jonnu Smith had an impactful game against Buffalo and, quite frankly, had room for more impact to be made on the game. Devon Achane was an elite football player against the Buffalo Bills. About the only thing that went right for you offensively. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, Buffalo had a plan, and their plan was effectively to say, we're going to take you guys out of the game, and we're going to dare you offensively to be as patient as you can be and take the other things and not resist trying to make things happen where there are not things present. And Mike McDaniel throughout much of training camp and the preseason when asked about offensive philosophy, talks about overplay. The Dolphins were getting overplay to take away Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And while they did not get targets or they did not get a lot of receptions, you could see they were continuing to try to take opportunities to get those guys the ball. And in reality, there were other opportunities with a guy like Jonnu Smith and a guy like Devon Achane who were playing well. Achane got a lot of balls. Jonnu got some balls, but probably could have got more balls in this game. Take advantage of how they're overplaying Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. This has become the great mystery of the Dolphins offense and the wide receiver 3 position. It's really not going to happen with wide receiver 3 right now. River Craycraft is out. Malik Washington's injured. Odell Beckham's on the pup. No, there's some unfortunate circumstances there. Some risks you knew you had, some risks you weren't anticipating you were going to be exposed to. But you got multiple tight ends that are scoring above expectation at a strong rate. You have multiple backs that are scoring above expectation at a strong rate. And you've got your 2 staple wide receivers. And this offensive line is actually scoring quite well in the run game and their execution of the run game. That doesn't mean it's not perfect. I actually think there's been more losses on the edge with skill players like Durham Smythe and Alec Ingold than there have been losses, true authentic losses with your guys up front. Now, are there times where Aaron Brewer, you wish illustrated a little bit more of a firm anchor in short yardage situations to hold the point of attack so that linebacker Dorian Williams can't come shooting through the A-gap and make a tackle on a fullback dive? Yes, absolutely. And from a true drop back passing perspective, there are a number of instances like the pick 6 against Buffalo where Kendall Lamb's playing his 2nd snap of the game. Lester Cotton's playing his 5th snap of the game. You don't handle a twist particularly well and pass it off. But you also have Jeff Wilson on the play who's taking a long time getting through his scan protection with nobody coming against a 4-man rush, doesn't offer any help on his way out the door. And if you're not going to do that, that's fine. But get out into your check down. It's 3rd and 5. And Tua doesn't make things any easier because he drifts backwards. Could he have stepped up and got the ball down to Jeff Wilson on a check down and given yourself a chance to make a completion? Probably. But instead he drifts backwards and everybody's angles and protection are now broken because the launch point is 5 yards further back than what you were expecting it was going to be. So things compounding. Miami has 100 yards rushing in the first half against Buffalo, and they looked good, and they are scoring well in a lot of metrics to run the ball. So my call for the Dolphins from a personnel perspective is to continue running the heavier personnel groups, and if you want to keep Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill fresh, don't put those dudes out there at the same time then, because all that's going to do is feed into the temptation for Mike McDaniel to want to run the ball. And this is a gut check window for a lot of members of this offense in terms of how, if you're going to give yourself the best chance to win, what you need to do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in addition to Skylar and what Skylar does well and what's different than Tua and how it can fit within the structure that currently exists. That's coming your way next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Whether you're a Pacific Northwest Dolphins fan, shout out Travis Wingfield, or perhaps you want to get down to Monday Night Football at the Rock here in a couple of weeks. Or maybe you want to get to a Canes game at the Rock. Get your tickets with Gametime. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can get tickets delivered directly to your phone With just a few taps, they give you the panoramic view, so there's no surprise sightlines when you get to the stadium. There's all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart to check out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. It is game time for Skylar Thompson. And Joe Rose asked me this morning on WQAM about Skylar and what dynamics of the Dolphins offense do you anticipate we will see and not see with Skylar versus Tua. Skylar is a little more athletic than Tua Tagovailoa. I do think he has a little bit more pop in his arm. I don't think he has anywhere the near level of precision and accuracy. I don't think we have a big enough body of work to believe that his footwork and timing as a result of that is on par with that of Tua. And I don't think his processing and field vision is on par with Tua Tagovailoa's either. So you're looking at, just based off of the nets and losses of the skills of the players, you're perhaps looking at a little bit bigger menu of access to the field as far as throws outside the numbers to the field. Can you get some more action going that way? Can you take advantage of the speed that you have on the perimeter and run guys off and run deep comebacks and run deep outs and be able to get that ball out there and have confidence that it's going to get there? That's not a very high volume part of any NFL offense, but it's an exceptionally small part of what the Dolphins do, in part because it's just not a natural strength of Tua Tagovailoa from an arm talent perspective. I also consider the tight window throws for Skylar. You saw some of this against Buffalo when he tried to layer throws between the second and third level of the defense. There was a void there. The Dolphins came out and attacked it a couple of times, missed a couple of throws to Julian Hill, missed a throw to Grant Dubose. That was a horrible decision, if we're being honest, from Skylar. And then missed a throw to Jonnu Smith in tight coverage, where we weren't quite able to pull the string on the ball and get it to go up over the second level and get down before you met the third level defenders. As a result, I think from Skylar Thompson's perspective, you're going to look to get involved with go balls. I think you're going to look to get involved with fades, double post and deep over, those longer developing concepts. And of course, there's a whole debate about the Dolphins and their ability to protect to get those plays off. But I think that's the ticket for Skylar, to give him the throwing concepts that give you the best chance, I think, to create some explosive plays in the passing game. How do you get there from a personnel standpoint? I go back to 12 and 21 and 22 personnel. When you look at the players that are executing well, it's running backs, it's tight ends, it's Devon A. Chan, it's Jonnu Smith, it's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, it's Julian Hill, far outperforming the likes of Durham Smythe, who is about a net neutral player across 67 snaps this season. And all of those players are far outperforming players that are below expectation, and that's the likes of Grant Dubose, Braxton Berrios, and Robbie Chosen. And you might get Malik Washington back. I don't think that's going to be a player that's going to be a savior for you by any means, unfortunately. So you take Miami's success running the ball. You take Miami's success with heavier personnel players to execute their assignments and responsibilities. You understand the desire to stretch the field. This is no longer a finely tuned sports car. It should not be. I think it would be irresponsible to take an analogy that might anger some fans, but it's the best one that I could think of that goes within the confines of the already established analogy that we have. You don't want to take a NASCAR driver and put him behind an F1 car and put him out there on the track. NASCAR, it's a lot of horsepower, and it's they do the road courses. I know they do a couple road courses, but it's left-hand turns. right? And it's just a question of, is it a 2-mile track? Is it a half-mile track? What's the gears we're getting to on the backstretch, right? Like, those are the questions. For an F1 car, it's very different, a lot more nuance. Can you turn this into a stock car instead of an F1 car? This offense, can you play heavier personnel, but know you've got the backstretch speed when you want to open it up, but you have to run the ball with conviction. You have to stay committed to running the ball. And I'm not just saying we got to line up and do 3 yards in a cloud of dust and run I formation. Run end arounds. So there were some touch passes with Waddle and Hill early in the game against Buffalo that had success and hit for you. You obviously have the outside zone. You have the ability to run power. Julian Hill, that's a player I would start putting more in line. I think a lot of his best work has come in line. Now, he's had some really nice space blocks, but he's also had some big whiffs in space that has yielded negative runs for your offense. There's an ideological shift that is going to have to happen here. And you don't need to look any further than what happened in Green Bay. Green Bay came into the season with Jordan Love. Jordan Love was one of the hottest ticket names in all of football. Jordan Love goes down at the end of the Eagles game with an MCL sprain. And the Packers come out with Malik Willis at quarterback, who's a more limited player, I think, at this stage than Skylar Thompson. And the Packers played the Colts. And the Packers pounded the absolute you-know-what out of the Indianapolis Colts. They ran for 261 yards. Malik Willis threw the ball 14 times. He went 12 of 14 for 122 yards. Josh Jacobs ran the ball 32 times for 151 yards. Jaden Reed had 2 for 37, including a 20-yard run. He had 2 10-plus yard runs, 2 explosive runs. Bo Melton had a 16-yard run. It's a coach off the same exact tree that Mike McDaniel's off of. There is a pathway to be a little bit more of a chameleon. And I think the worst thing that you can do with Skylar is say, oh, well, he's been in the system 3 years. He knows it. Let's just do all the stuff we would do anyway. Because all that is going to do is put Skylar in a position where you're asking him to be Tua, who you have uniquely tailored this offense to. It is time to tailor now, with the quarterback out of the picture for the indefinite future, it's time to tailor how you call the offense to the talent that is available and not to the ideological philosophy that you have committed to since the moment you came into the building. And that responsibility falls on Mike McDaniel. We're going to talk a little bit more about Mike McDaniel and how he can get this right and the gut check that awaits some members of this Dolphins team. That is next year on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. You have heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, but now through September 22nd, we have something a little different for you. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 free weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV with the YouTube TV base plan. You'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Some interesting movement on this Dolphins game. It was off the board with the Tua injury. Came back on. Seattle was favored by 6.5. That number last I saw was down to 5. Could there be some McDaniel magic in the making? Who knows? But that number moving towards Miami seems to people think the Dolphins have a puncher's chance in Seattle. And I think they do too, but they have to be very careful with how they walk this line. We're going to talk about that. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right. So Mike McDaniel and the gut check for the Dolphins. The Dolphins wide receivers, 2K watch, 150 targets. That's all going to go bye-byes, right? That's not how this is going to fly if it's going to work for the Miami Dolphins. And I don't think the inspiration continues to be what you saw in Green Bay with Malik Willis this past week. The Packers ran the ball 53 times. 53. And threw the ball 14. Now, they finished with almost 400 yards of offense. They won time of possession 2-1. They won the turnover battle by +2. They were efficient on third down, 10 of 17, because they were balanced offensively. You have to call games differently. The 4th and 4s at the plus 49-yard line, we got to stop calling them. And, I'm sympathetic to the call that the Dolphins had on the 4th down against Buffalo because they had a winning play designed. Jalen Waddle fell down. Jalen Waddle was one of seemingly every player on the field that was a skill player you'd think had never played on that field before. Buffalo was exponentially better equipped to play on the surface than the Dolphins were because all their skill guys are falling down. There's reps in the 4th quarter where there's 3 Dolphins eligible players who fell down at the break, sitting on the ground. Look it up. So that's one thing for me that was a big takeaway for the game. So I'm sympathetic to you probably had a winning call there on 4th down because the previous possession, you had a 3rd down and you ran double slants and you threw it to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle cooked the other player, but ran the underneath slot, had 3 yards of separation. You didn't throw him the ball. You threw the ball to Tyreek Hill. So then you come back next time you get a 4th down, you say, okay, we're going to run a switch. We're going to get Waddle in a matchup. He's going to run a slant and he falls down. He stems outside and sets up the option route and then he falls down. But you can't call those with Skylar Thompson. You have to play field position. You have to play disciplined. You have to play clock control. You have to try to manufacture explosive plays. And if that means you run out in 22 personnel, and I think your best combination of talent right now is probably Ingold, Julian Hill, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, and one of the 2 wide receivers. And I'd build all my packages off of that because that's going to keep you in base. It's going to keep you prone to putting an extra hat down in the box. And if you want to keep Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill fresh, you can play those guys at the same time. Now, you want to get more than one wide receiver on the field, maybe put somebody in the backfield. You saw some smatterings of that versus Buffalo. This is where the genius, the perceived genius of Mike McDaniel, it has to show up. And it has to show up in creative ways to get your guys the ball, but do so in a way that does not put Skylar Thompson in a position to be amplified as the questionable processor as a career 3rd-year backup. Ask him to do the simple things. And by golly, you could have ran the ball against Buffalo for a lot more yards than you did. But the game script didn't play that way because we came out throwing the ball to Robbie Chosen and to Grant Dubose in the 1st quarter, and you threw 2 picks. And then your receiver falls down on 4th down, and you give up an explosive play. And there's a whole element of defense and explosive plays that needs to get tightened up. And that'll help the game script. So for these Dolphins receivers, I think that's the big gut check that we probably need to be prepared for. And case in point, the Packers aren't paying 2 receivers $30 million a season like the Dolphins are close to with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But they got a lot of options. And from a targets perspective, Dontavian Wicks got 4 targets. Romeo Doubs got 3 targets. Jaden Reed got 2 targets and 2 carries. Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft combined for 3 targets. You can't be a volume passing attack anymore. And it seems like with the presence of the wide receivers, that's what Miami wants to be, but it's not what they're doing well right now. What they're doing well is running the ball. So play and approach a game script that will allow you to predominantly run the ball. And then that will allow you to create a handful of explosive play opportunities. And then the responsibility is on Skylar Thompson to not throw a never in history ball like the one he threw to Braxton Berrios that was 5 yards out of bounds when he's trying to throw a fade in the red zone. That's how this offense stays between the lines. It's got the talent and a pathway to keep its head above water against the softer part of the schedule. But if Mike McDaniel is the coach that everybody would like to think that he is, and I know there's more questions after a rough couple of games to start the season, He's got to show that there's more than one way that he's capable of coaching to win football games. And with a quarterback that's been in this system now going on his third year, you know who he is. And you've got a little bit of body work to understand what your offense does well. Figure it out. And we'll see what happens. We're going to evaluate. We have more content coming your way this week here on Locked On Dolphins, including crossover Thursday with Locked On Seahawks to get you ready for Sunday afternoon's contest in Seattle for week 3. We will be keeping our eye on the injury report, a couple of injured Dolphins along the offensive line up front, in addition to Tua Tagovailoa. So plenty to keep an eye out for. We hope you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.